do I resist temptation whilst working in a fabric shop? Do I feel conflicted working for a fabric company whilst also personally promoting a reduction in consumption? Just two of the fun and occasionally spicy questions posed to me when I was invited to chat with attendees in the virtual sewing room at the beginning of the year. Hang on a couple of minutes and I'll get to the answers. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 17 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate and ecological crises, and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to them. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. And I really hope you'll join me in this journey. Hello, lovely one. Thank you for joining me and listening to the podcast today. I hope you're having a good day, whatever it is that you're up to as you listen to it. And if you ever feel like telling me what else you're up to as you listen to Check Your Thread, please feel free to message me or tag Check Your Thread on Instagram. Lovely listener Rian recently sent me a photo of a steep hill that they were climbing in the heat to go to the dentist and informed me that I was accompanying her both up and then later down that hill. So have you had any sustainability wins this week? I can't think of many this end aside from some second-hand wins for my big kid. So they are taking part in their first school play next month, which is Aladdin. And the day after that, they are having their end of school prom because they're heading off to big school in September. So I managed to order everything I needed for the costume and get a prom dress all from Vinted and eBay. I just need to get them some sandals, which I'll probably buy new so that they can try them on. But that's it. The prom dress literally cost £5, so I saved a whole bunch of money as well. A sustainability win that was recently shared in the Check Your Thread Patreon community chat spaces comes from Amy. Amy says they recently dyed a pair of sandals that are 10 years old but were barely worn. So now they basically have new shoes for the summer. So let that be a reminder to all of us, it's often possible to dye, paint or recover shoes and sandals to give them a refresh or a different look. So we can go shopping in our own cupboards rather than the stores for new summer footwear. Plus you already know that they fit. Thanks for that, Amy. And thanks to new patrons Anne-Marie and Amber. Anne-Marie and Amber both stepped up this week to support the podcast via Patreon, which I'm enormously grateful for. If you are interested in being part of the Check Your Thread Patreon crew, please head to patreon.com/checkyourthread to find out what's going on and to sign up for literally any amount per month that makes sense for you. So onward to the main part of this week's episode. This is the second half of a discussion I had in the virtual sewing room at the beginning of this year. You can hear the first part with Jenny Baby, who organises the virtual sewing room, and the attendees in episode 172. But you don't need to have heard that one necessarily before listening to this. This half is an interesting one. I consider myself a pretty open person and I welcome honest, open, but obviously respectful feedback and inquiry. So I was very happy to answer these slightly personal and potentially exposing questions and have slightly awkward conversations about the duality of working for a fabric company whilst also regularly promoting the idea of buying less fabric. Anyway, I hope that you find it interesting. If you have any follow-up comments, you can email me, zoe@checkyourthread.com, or you can find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. So the reason that I wanted to play you this half of the conversation now is because it very neatly lines up three topics that we'll be looking at directly over the next 3 episodes. So consider this one a tease in that sense. So until next week, when we're touching on a topic that we haven't really spoken about before that might help you reduce the number of unworn sewing projects. Take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones, and those in the world that need our help. Have a look to see if you have any shoes that could do with an update and a refresh rather than buying new ones, and enjoy.
Because you work for Fabric Godmother some days a week, do you find it hard working in a fabric shop with so many pretty fabrics coming out regularly? Are you able to resist the temptation?
Yeah. Yes.
How?
Okay, so I'll be honest, I struggled the first year. Yes, I was a little bit, I didn't buy everything, but I was very tempted every day. I think that whole thing about really digging deep and knowing my style has really, really helped. and understanding a number of things. Understanding that there is always going to be more fabric. There's always more fabric coming through whenever you step into a sewing shop or go on an online thing. There'll be something that will catch your eye. There's always going to be something. So when something lovely comes through and you're like, oh, that's so nice. If you don't get that, there will be something else equally nice, like when you've got the money or when you're ready to sew something. So that has helped. Another thing, yeah, as I say, is really knowing my style, knowing what colours suit me is super important. That's something that I think we've all kind of maybe made the mistake of possibly before, making something that we love, the fabric we love, but actually next to our skin or next to our complexion, it's like there was this incredible fabric that came through that has got when it comes to prints, I don't really love florals. I like kind of quirky prints like pot plants or like random things. And there was one that came through that had people painting pictures and chairs. It was so random and I adored it and the colours were beautiful. And I bought some of it and I made a blouse. It really took my time. I knew it was a pattern that I was going to love and la la la. And I just never wear it. And the reason is because the base colour of the fabric is this blush pink. And that does nothing for me. It really like, oh, it's not good. So I never wear it. And I really took that to heart. And I think I need to be careful with what the colours are. I think if we're doing seasons, I'm probably more on autumn or winter. So for me, like more jewel colours, purer colours, not so muted colours suit me. I'm a big fan of mustardy colours and chartreusey colours. They're great, but not really next to my face. So those I might wear further down or maybe as a cardigan, but not kind of round my neck. Sometimes I just do that anyway. But generally speaking, yeah, knowing what colours suit has really helped. And also knowing that you can appreciate a fabric like you can appreciate a piece of art, you don't have to own every beautiful painting that you ever see, or you don't have to own every lovely wallpaper you've ever seen. Do you know what I mean? Like you can just appreciate something and think like, yeah, that's really lovely. And I'm really excited that somebody else is going to make something cool out of that. And that's great, So yes, I've also learned that for me, I tend to wear, despite what I'm wearing today, I tend to wear like solid colours more. So that rules out a lot of fabrics that come through. And then also, I did the Last Sewist Standing challenge 2 years ago. No, yeah, so not the last year, but the year before. And I found it really transformative. And it really it didn't necessarily change my buying habits particularly, but it really changed my mindset and it refocused my attention on what I already have and the things that I've already bought, that I already love, that deserve to be made into the things that I want to wear, So if people are thinking about doing the Last Sewist Standing challenge, even for a little bit, it's really worth it because it's like the mindset shift or the habit shift, that can be really powerful. So yes, I can now resist, but I couldn't always.
But Amy, who took part in Last Sewist Standing, saying the mantra for "there's always more fabric" really helped to get her through it.
Right. Maybe we should all write that on our wall somewhere.
Yeah. So
Or certainly above our fabric stash.
Yeah. Definitely. And yeah, just knowing that Amy and B were doing it and we were supporting them throughout, like I think they've really influenced other attendees of the actual sewing room, just learning through them about stuff and just being more conscious. So I think that challenge is great. I won't be taking part in it, but I'm definitely creating my own goals off the back of them doing it and knowing I have plenty. So there's always more fabric.
And there's lots of different, if your personality responds well to challenges, there are other ones that might be more suitable for you as well. Like, for example, that whole 30 yards challenge. That's another thing that might work for you. I just recorded, spoiler alert, I just recorded a really good conversation with Judith Staley, the lady that co-founded the Sew Over 50 community. I spoke to her like 3 years ago for the podcast, but we just had another conversation last week. And she's now adopting a principle of buying only 5 pieces a year, which I think is really, really good. And it's not about, there's not that kind of, some people might be like, They need that, like, no, literally, I'm not buying fabric like for a year. I don't even think about it. That's fine. But for others, that might make them feel a bit uncomfortable, or that's not going to work for them. So some sort of reduction, some sort of number that could help, because you can buy fabric. You can still go on the fabric online shops or in person, and you can plan projects and you can buy fabric, but just not all the fabric. So there's
Well,
other ways, there's other things that might chime better with people, if being more mindful of the amount of fabric that you're buying is something that you want to kind of, bring to the fore.
with it being a new year in January and reflections and whatnot, like a few people have said about, I won't buy any fabric apart from when we go on a trip together to here and when I go on holiday to there. Like that's their stipulation. Like they're allowed to, that's their permission, but they have to concentrate on what they've got just to help them focus, and knowing that they do have plenty of jersey for this and woven for that. Like,
Yeah, that's
good
lovely,
time
because
of
some
year
people, they
thing.
do like to do that, don't they? They buy fabric as a souvenir, almost as a way to capture a memory of a trip or something. And that's lovely. That's really nice. And that's going to then make a garment. It's just about being mindful, isn't it? Because then the thing that you eventually make with that will have extra resonance, and you'll have an extra deeper connection with it. So that's lovely.
Yeah, and personalizing it to where you are on your sewing journey, however long you've been sewing, whatever you sew, being able to adopt whatever resolution you want. But just,
Absolutely. Everyone's different.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you see some, like the Last Sewist Standing, you had the different tiers. Like, okay, I can't do the heavyweight category, but I could do lightweight if I'm allowed to go on holiday and buy that fabric. Like, that's my one thing. Like, making
Totally.
your own challenge and having someone that you can perhaps be accountable with and just let someone know this is what I'm doing, then
Yeah.
that's really supportive then to get them to keep you on track.
Totally. I mean, I am obsessed with Gretchen Rubin's four tendencies. So I think knowing what your tendency is really, really helpful. Like whether you're an upholder, a rebel, a questioner, or a obliger. I really recommend everyone do the Gretchen Rubin quiz, find out who they are, and then just knowing things about yourself. Like you don't have to try and change yourself. Like what's just going to work better for you? Like if you're an obliger, obligers respond well to outer accountability. So something like signing up to a pledge or having a sewing buddy with whom you keep accountable to, that's going to work really well. But for other people who maybe like rebels, they might literally rebel against any kind of restriction, whereas for them they might respond better to thinking of what kind of person am I. Like personality is very important to them, so like saying I'm the kind of person who is mindful of my consumption, and adopting that kind of mindset, like things like that, like knowing about yourself. And then there's lots of different ways to approach things. Like I know that I am a moderator. So I find when I come to consuming things, I'm quite good if I just am allowed a little bit of something, rather than, I can't remember what the other term is, when you go like, no, I'm not going to have anything. That makes me feel, thank you for putting the quiz up. Thank you, Amy.
I think we actually spoke about this quiz before Christmas on one of our sessions because someone mentioned it and they found it useful. Yeah, I was an obliger, just like Bees mentioned in the chat. Like I didn't need to take the test, I knew, but I did the
Like
test
that.
and confirmed. I was like, yep, that's me. Um,
I'm an upholder, but I tip to obliger, so I do relate.
Yvette says it's striking a balance between what you want to achieve and keeping sewing joyful for you, which is very
Absolutely. You've got to keep it fun. And actually, that's something that I really have discovered through doing the podcast. That there is, okay, it's going to sound ridiculous, but I'm going to say it anyway. There is so much fun and creativity to be found through restriction, like through creating some kind of barriers for yourself, be that consumption, be that whatever. Literally, there's only so much of this, like yourself, like there's only so much of this bit of fabric. What can I make from it? It's really an invitation to be really resourceful and creative in a way that if you just buy whatever, whenever the desire strikes, like that's fine. Like that can be fun. And obviously, people are all different, but I've really found that there is a lot of fun and creativity and resourcefulness to be found through creating some kind of, I don't know if limits or barriers is the word, but yeah, like doing the Last Sewist Standing challenge, I had to get creative. I had to think like, right, okay, I want to make this, but I don't have quite enough fabric, or I don't have the right elastic, or I don't have the right zip. Like otherwise I would have just gone out and got those things. But by having to be a bit creative, like I came up with some really interesting and ingenious kind of workarounds. And I feel so proud of those, and I have a greater connection with those pieces because I had to be a bit more creative. And that's something that I didn't really predict going into like making the podcast. I thought generally it was going to be about natural dyeing or, organic fibers. And what I discovered after, because basically, I'll be honest with you, I make the podcast for me. Like the podcast is my opportunity to speak to people that I'm inspired by, who are doing something interesting and cool, and I just want the excuse to talk to them, and find out more. And it's a bit weird if I just say, "Can you talk to me?" If I say, "Can you talk to me for a podcast?" It's a little less weird. So yeah, and I increasingly finding that I am drawn to people who have been adopting these interesting kind of restrictions and enforcing this kind of resourcefulness and creativity, and that's been really eye-opening.
Yeah. I did the virtual sewing room for myself as well. I wanted to talk to people about fabric and patterns and things. So
I love it. Exactly. Let's just create what we want and put it out there, and hopefully other people will want it too. And clearly they do, because clearly people listen to my podcast and people visit the virtual sewing room. So we weren't wrong.
No, it works. Joe's got a great question. What about dead stock fabrics? I've heard they're not always as sustainable as they appear.
May I invite Joe to listen to the podcast episode that I made about deadstock fabric with the New Craft House, because they have a very interesting unpacking of the whole deadstock fabric debate. Because I think deadstock is, and we really explored that term and what that can mean. And often the word deadstock gets confused and also kind of overlapped with overstock and overproduction. So it's not as straightforward as like, yes, that's good, or no, that's bad. It's a bit more complicated. And without really going into it now, because that could be a whole hour, I really recommend, please go and listen to the episode with the New Craft House. Whether or not after listening to that, you then decide that, yes, you'd like to purchase some deadstock fabric, or no, is by the by. But yes, please do. Yes, Joe, please do listen to it, because it's not as cut and dried as saying, yeah, it's good, or no, it's a problem. Sometimes it's definitely used as a greenwashing term for sure. But in other ways, it is kind of, there is a lot of fabric out there that would otherwise be probably incinerated that is now not. So yeah.
Yeah, it kind of leads me on to the next question. I know we're coming shortly to the end.
Well, I'm hanging around. I've got my sock to mend, so if it goes over there, I'm fine with that.
Do you ever feel like there's a conflict of interest with so many new fabrics coming through in an industry that's getting very busy with choice?
This is so interesting. I'd like you to explain this. Do you think, as in, like, in what way conflict of interest? Like a conflict that I work for a fabric shop, or is that what you mean? Like personally, if I should have a conflict of interest?
Yeah.
Okay. So how I feel about this is people are going to be buying fabric. So I would say that the alternative to buying fabric from the fabric shop, where I work, for example, would, people are going to be buying fabric whether or not that fabric shop exists or not. I think that we all do definitely need to be kind of thinking about our consumption, reducing our consumption. I would feel conflicted if I worked for Hobbycraft, for example. I would feel conflicted if I worked for Amazon. I would feel conflicted if I worked for Joann's if I lived in the US, to be honest. I think that small businesses, local businesses do a hell of a lot for society. I mean, for example, okay, so this is a fact that I find fascinating. Spending money at a small business over spending money, for example, at Hobbycraft or whatever, the money that a small business then puts into the local community is 3 times as much as the equivalent money being put in from a big box store or like a big, online retailer. Like it is better for society that we support small businesses. There's so many reasons why. In fact, I made a podcast episode on this called No Small Business on a Dead Planet. And this was all about the conflict between our desire and our need to reduce consumption, but also supporting small business. So I would really recommend listening to No Small Business on a Dead Planet, because in fact, I think I've got a link here. Hang on, I can drop this in the chat. Right, I've just popped it in the chat. I do think it's possible to both support small business but also lower our consumption of things. Yeah. Do I like everything that my employer does? Or would I go about everything in exactly the same way if I owned it? I don't know. I mean, there's different ways, isn't there? Like, I made those episodes with Bevan from Born Textiles, and they have another way of being a small business in the sewing community in the world. You know, what I can say about Fabric Godmother is that they are actually quite sustainability minded. For example, everything gets recycled that can possibly be recycled. No textiles goes to landfill. I'm actually their sustainability coordinator as well, so it's my job to look out for different ways that we can be more sustainable. We do all sorts of things, like we recycle all the plastic that comes, or the fabrics that come, they either use it to wrap up their wholesale orders that get sent out, or they have a recycling kind of external company that they pay for. Everything gets recycled that can be. We've got a compost bin in the kitchen. Like, we've done everything that we can to be as sustainable as we can, really. Yeah, I mean, I wish that there was a little less fleece being sold at the moment, but that's kind of like they're responding to trends, so it's complicated because they are also supporting, I think 15 people work there now, like largely lots of us part-time, so that's 15 families that are being in part supported. So it's really complicated, and I do get it, but I love the spicy question, and I'm very open to being questioned further.
Joe asks, do you get negativity towards eco stuff like there is with electric car? Well, yeah, in the electric car world. So I don't know if you mean stuff like products, Joe. So negative.
Yeah, please expand on that. I'd love to talk about that.
I know that we both have electric cars, and my husband has a lot to do with the kind of YouTubes and all sorts of research into it. And there's a lot of men in particular who are very negative about electronic vehicles, about eco-friendliness, about the whole thing, isn't it? It's like a political thing with climate change and all of that sort of thing. I wonder whether that ever finds its way into what you talk about with sustainability.
I would say it definitely impacts my personal life.
Yeah, I bet.
I've definitely got a little bit of a rep as being what I term as an eco-twat. And and I think that comes off of people feeling judged, doesn't it? I think that's ultimately it. Whether or not you were judging them and you've said anything, or whether or not it's like there's a little bit of guilt there, and then I think it's to do with feeling guilty, feeling judged, and it's easier to attack than question your actual actions and where those awkward feelings are coming from. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
But I would say, in terms of the podcast, I definitely have come up. I've had some very spicy emails from people that are like, especially when I kind of make the more political ones. I've had some really negative ones. A lot of people that are like, sewing is my happy place. I don't want to think about this whilst I'm thinking about my sewing, like I don't want to think about climate change or once again, I think it's people feeling judged. And although I do my absolute best to make the podcast as inclusive and joyful and fun, and like, let's see what on a positive way we can do, rather than like, we shouldn't do this, I guess some people feel judged. And I know, for example, that Check Your Thread will never be as big as the Love to Sew podcast, which is an excellent podcast. I'm not slagging it off in any way, but it obviously takes a very deliberate, apolitical, neutral kind of stance. And they have their sustainability episodes occasionally, but it's an aspect. It's not the thing. So I know that Check Your Thread will never be as big as Love to Sew because for a lot of people, it's like, sewing's my happy place. It's where I go to kind of unwind. And I totally get that. And I do respect that. I just feel that I don't know that we have that much time to not be thinking about sustainability in all the ways in which we show up in the world,
Yeah, I agree.
I think you're right, Yvette. So I've just seen in the vet. Sounds like they're listening to the wrong podcast. You're right. They are listening to the wrong podcast if they don't want the spiciness. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that any further, but yeah, there has been some spice. I don't normally respond, to be honest, because it's like...
Yeah, which is generally the right way to respond to certain things.
Yeah, I mean, I made a whole episode called Sewing is Political based literally on one email that I got. But
is there anything that you wish you knew when you started sewing about sewing more sustainability, which you now know?
The how much impact fabric production has, how much destruction is created by the fabric industry. And, when I started sewing, that was like in the 90s, and we didn't really know about the impact that fabric production has. I never thought that synthetic fibers were never going to go anywhere, that they will always remain on the planet in some form, poisoning waterways, existing in landfill. And there's definitely some things that I regret. Like, I remember when I did my final collection at university, and I had a load of sweatshirting left, and I had to move home, at the end where you're packing up your student accommodation, and I put it in the bin. Like, I just put it straight up in the bin. It was perfectly good sweatshirting fabric. And now I'm like, I would never do that. But, so yes, I wish I knew those things, because I knew that I would be less wasteful. And I wish that I had those 3 principles that I talked about before, about making clothes that fit my style, my body, and my lifestyle. I wish that I considered those more, because like many people, I'm sure, I have a trail of failed garments in my past, that I wish hadn't been there. But, I mean, I don't think that you can make every single garment a complete success. Of course not. And the mistakes is often where you learn from the most. But it's always a balance, isn't it? I think that, we should try. We should try to make things that are a success.
Yeah, and mistakes remind us that we are human. So we are allowed to. Oh, another spicy question from Carly.
You read out.
If it was easier to implement, is there a really big or obvious change that you would like to see Fabric Godmother and other similar businesses make? For example, they print a lot of brand new fabric seemingly very regularly. Do you think this is unavoidable for them, seeing how successful they are compared to other independent fabric shops? No shade intended, just a huge fabric.
No, I love it. I love it. No shade received. This is a great question. I do think maybe they could slow down the release a little bit of the collections, for sure. It's not how I would necessarily do things. But then once again, as you say, that is kind of the reason that they're probably more successful than some other ones. I don't know. I would say that also, just because they're producing fabric doesn't mean to say people have to buy it. So I think that also there is the responsibility on consumers to think like, yeah, that's a lovely print, but is it for me? Is it actually going to be something that I'm going to wear and make? Something that I really think that Fabric Godmother do well, and it's something that I've totally seen other fabric companies copy, is that Josie is really good at talking about the fabrics, and as you're showing the new range, and talking about what they could be, what would work well in terms of patterns, in terms of garment types. She's not just encouraging people to buy fabric for the sake, and she's not really like, that guilty pleasure, let's fill our stash. She doesn't really kind of buy into that. She doesn't encourage that kind of, I don't want to say hoardy, but hoardy. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think she's always been good. Like, she has a deep love of fabric, a deep love of clothing, and is always talking about what this fabric could and should be, rather than just like, let's just buy it because it's pretty and just have it and it's like in my lair,
I've always thought that she does that really well on social media, doing the videos going, just revealing the fabrics like this, and look how drapey it is. This would be perfect for a blouse. Like, I think that's really
nice. Yeah. And even doing like pattern matching, like the suggestions. So you really get a sense of like what that would be. Like they definitely present fabric as something to be made into a garment to be loved and worn, not just on a shelf for the next 10 years, So there's that. Also, I think that I would like, and this is really tough because it's not easy, but I think that it'd be great if more mid-sized businesses, probably not the small ones, looked into B Corp certification. Yeah. I think that's a really interesting endeavour. It's not super viable for the really small ones, but they do. That's really interesting. I know I spoke to Seamwork, Sari from Seamwork, and previously collect patterns, and they've become B Corp certified because they're a bit bigger. But I think it'd be great if more businesses looked into that, because that looks at sustainability and ethics in really broadly, but also really deeply. So that would be great. I'd like to see that. Whether or not Fabric Godmother, maybe they'll get to a slightly bigger where that's a bit more viable. I'm certainly going to start looking into it for them, as to see at what stage of growth that would be worth exploring,
Yeah. Do you know if there are any other fabric shops or similar businesses that have a sustainability manager or someone that looks after that side of things?
That's a good question. I don't know, because this is the thing. Like, I didn't ask to be sustainability coordinator. Like Josie said, like, I want to focus more on sustainability. Like, you're bang into it. Do you want to be? I'm like, yes, please. But no, I don't know. Maybe there are.
No, I've not come across it, but I mean, knowing you have that job title doesn't surprise me. But
yeah, we do some cool stuff. Like, for example, like all the kind of like the real scrappy, like end of roll bits, or where there's been a section where there's been a join or something. We collect all of those and we work hard to make sure we distribute those to schools or to quilting guilds, or to, like, there's a lot of kind of charities that get in touch, and we even sometimes post things out to, charities that are doing some really good stuff and they just need some bits of fabric. And
glad they're doing stuff. It's reassuring. Jo mentioned that she's pulled out her husband's torn jeans out of the bin to go into the upcycling bin. So good work.
Love that.
Pile of mending I need to get through at some point. I think that's the most part of all my sustainability questions. If no one has anything else, spicy or otherwise.
I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on all this. And also, like, I mean, does anyone know of any like sustainability coordinators or things like that in other industries, on other people's, like, where people work and stuff? Like, how broad is it?
Well, just from my background, so I worked for a charity called Sustrans for 7 years, or almost 7 years, and they focused on encouraging people to walk and cycle places, especially within their local neighbourhoods. And there's definitely we've seen universities and bigger workplaces taking on sustainability managers who deal with things such as the kind of car parking and encouraging more people to walk, cycle, take public transport. Locally working with the universities quite a bit. So yeah, universities definitely. I knew a friend who worked at one of the local universities, and they were encouraging students to think about sustainability and having...
Yeah, education is quite good for that, isn't it?
Yeah, she implemented some interesting things and to encourage them to think about all kinds of things, especially like, I think they had like the toilet paper, who gives a crap and things like that. But yeah, all sorts. So there are slowly little bits like that coming through, some really interesting opportunities that used to come up. I think there's one now, they're working with the National Trust to encourage people to come more sustainability to some of their venues across the south, which, yeah, I thought was a fascinating project. That's a new one for them. Definitely little things trickling through. Carly said, as a children's book designer, and the company I work for has sustainability controller.
Oh,
yeah, and runs a group for anyone to give a chance to ask questions and suggestions, etc.
Oh, I love that.
It's nice to have that platform within a business to be able to go to. So I'm going to wrap up the recording here. Thank you for questions from everyone and
thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Zoe, for your time and your input into all of that. Is fascinating hour of all things sewing more sustainability. So thank you, and
thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!